Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the 209 podcast. Now, lately, we've been talking a lot about the coronavirus pandemic, bringing in local experts to share their knowledge with you guys so you can stay safe during this pandemic. But we wanted to switch gears this week and maybe talk about something that you might have heard of called Tiger King. We found a way to put a local spin on this because we happen to be very good friends with Ed Stewart. He's the co-founder of Performing Animal Welfare Society and their wildlife sanctuary in San Andreas here in the 209. Now, we learned a lot about not only PAWS during this podcast, but a little bit more about Tiger King than we were expecting. So it's a really good episode, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Don't forget, you can listen to this podcast at studio209.tv on YouTube and all podcasting platforms. So now, let's dive into the discussion on the 209 podcast. All right, Ed, thanks for joining us on the 209 podcast. Now, myself, I've met you before. I'm very familiar with what it is that you do as co-founder of PAWS, but I was wondering if you could explain what PAWS is, what it stands for, and what it is you guys do, just to kick things off here.
Well, the acronym is Performing Animal Welfare Society, so PAWS. We started pretty much protecting animals in entertainment, and then it just broadened out to all animals in captivity over the last 36 years. We've been around since 1984. And so that's our mission, is to improve the lives of captive animals and really prevent as many animals from living in cages as we can. I think we've all learned a lot in the last few weeks that it can be a really ugly life for an animal that has to live in captivity, especially an exotic animal. So that's our mission. We also have a sanctuary that we didn't plan on having, but now we do have. And we were just going to be advocates for animals, but it developed into actually taking animals on. And we have 8 elephants, including 2 bull elephants that are taller than a basketball hoop and weigh 13,000 pounds, and everything from elephants to tigers, bears, a lion. So, we also take animals in need and try to give them a respectful life for, the last years that they have.
Yeah, and Studio 209 actually visited your guys' sanctuary. It's called ARC 2000. That was last April. And that was a year ago. So I was wondering if you could let us know, how you guys are doing now during this pandemic, how it has affected you guys.
Well, so far the pandemic hasn't affected us, too negatively. We've had to cancel some of our events, which everybody understands. Actually, we were one of the first to realize that it wasn't a good thing to have groups of people coming in. So we canceled our open house in May. That was Mother's Day. Then a few smaller events, and we had to cancel our international conference, which comes up in the fall, that we were also going to have here. We get people from all over the world: Asia, Africa, Europe. People fly in, so it was hard to schedule everything and really know what things were going to be like in November. We'll have all that again, though. We'll get back on track with, especially with the conference. It's one of the best conferences that people participate in. They really love coming here.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could kind of dive into just why you guys have those days where people can come and see, and why you only have very few of those days where people can see the animals.
Well, to tell the truth, I think a lot of these animals that we take from roadside zoos and circuses and pretty horrible situations, I think they almost have seen enough people. It's so nice. Well, you've been here, and it's so nice and so quiet. And it's it's just a comfortable place for them. And so we don't do too many. We like people to be able to come and see what we do. And when the people come, it's very respectful. Also, we keep people at a pretty good distance from the animals. I'm around to talk to the people about the elephants. We have tiger keepers talking about where the tigers came from and their plight. So we try to make it educated. It's not a day to come and take a selfie with a tiger or an elephant. It's more of a place to come and learn about the plight of animals in captivity, because that's what we really want people to understand, is that it's just not the place for animals. It's captivity has extreme limitations on wildlife, and so we want to give our point of view, which is different than a lot of places where you might go see an animal.
Right. And the reason, partly that we wanted to talk to you guys today over at PAWS is everyone is stuck inside of their homes. They're watching Netflix, and everyone can't stop talking about this docuseries Tiger King. Have you watched it yet?
Yeah, it was kind of in my job description to watch that. They actually came and interviewed me for that show,
No
and
way.
yeah, they did. And in fact, the producer, I think he's been here a couple of times, and also he came to our conference and interviewed several people there, including me again. So after I saw what it looked like in the first two episodes, I ran it through fast just to make sure I wasn't in it. I was never so happy not to be. And it's gotten mixed reviews from the animal welfare movement. A lot of people think it would have been better to show more of the plight of the animals. But the people in the show, to me, it wasn't surprising. I mean, people like that are the ones who wind up running roadside zoos and getting animals for carnivals and circuses and pets. And so I thought it was good to show what kind of people wind up in that business, and what an ugly business it is. I've always said you never find anybody with a kid at Stanford that has a tiger in their backyard. It's
Yeah.
always somebody who's on parole, has a drug problem, has domestic violence problems, goes to jail. I counted up the other day. We've taken 50 tigers from people who either went to jail or had been in jail. And so it didn't really surprise me that it was so shocking to everybody else.
Yeah. Like you said, a lot of characters on that show. You had Joe Exotic in Oklahoma and Carol Baskin with her Sanctuary and Doc Antle. Did you know of any of these people prior to watching the documentary? Like, had you heard of them?
Oh yeah, I've heard of all of them. And Doc Antle, I mean, back I think it was in the 80s, we knew about him. And the thing that bothers me the most, in fact, we're just putting out some information about that show on our sort of a monthly newsletter that we put out. 30 years ago, or actually more, we went to the Zoo Association. Pat Derby and I, who started PAWS, we knew we needed the zoos to help stop people like you saw in that show, and make sure that people like that weren't breeding tigers, weren't stealing the babies from the mothers, weren't shooting the tigers, and so we went to the zoos, the major zoos in the country, and they didn't help us. And so we were on our own. We've pretty much gotten circuses off the map. They're pretty much gone because people understood, after so many years of trying to educate people, they finally understood that elephants shouldn't be on a chain, and they shouldn't be traveling from city to city in a train car or a truck, and being addressed by a bullhook, a weapon with a steel point and a steel hook on the end. So people understood that, and the circus is pretty much vanishing. they don't really understand about tigers. That tigers are an endangered animal, and so when I was growing up and when everybody was growing up, it's drilled into your head that you have to save tigers, and the way you save tigers is to breed tigers. But that's not the way to save tigers. The way to save any animal is to save their habitat. Anybody, it's not hard to breed tigers. So you put a male and a female together, and if they don't injure each other or kill each other, which happens periodically, they'll breed 50 times a day. They breed constantly. Somebody is going to have a litter. And we've taken animals from a place where they bred a female. They usually breed, maybe once every 3 years. And they have a litter, and it gets to be a couple of years old, and then they come back in season, they breed again. In captivity, they bred this female 4 times in 14 months.
Wow.
And the last litter she had was dead, mostly dead. And she was sick too. You take the babies away, the female comes back into season, and she's bred again and again and again. It's worse than a puppy mill.
Yeah. And one of the things that's really touted in this documentary, not by the filmmakers, but rather the men and women that you see running these places, is that by breeding the tigers, you're helping the species, but by dragging them around to these malls and letting children hold the cubs, it's a form of education. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we're teaching disrespect. I think kids learn something that it's okay to hold a baby tiger for some reason. The tigers know how to procreate. If we back off of their habitat and let them live where they're supposed to, nobody's ever taken a baby tiger and raised it in captivity and released it to the wild. Not one tiger out of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of tigers. It just has never been done. It isn't done with chimpanzees. It isn't done with elephants. It just isn't realistic. And now we know that they can also, if you had a situation where they could be reintroduced, now you're reintroducing disease back to the natural population. So there's so many things that are misunderstood about captivity. The animals that are born in captivity live their whole life in a cage and die in a cage. And, none of this has anything to do with conservation. And I think it's an education, but it's a terrible education for your kids.
Yeah. And we see Carol Baskin in this documentary, and she has what she calls a sanctuary. I've been to PAWS, I've been to ARC 2000, and I've seen the conditions that your animals are living out the rest of their lives in. How do you think PAWS and ARC 2000 compares to a sanctuary like Carol Baskin's, or even, some of the other roadside zoos, or, Doc Antle's Myrtle Beach vacation place? How do you guys compare to that, would you say?
Well, I've never been to Antle's. I've never been to Joe Exotic's, and I've never been to Carol Baskin. The difference between those three is that Doc Antle, Kevin Antle is his real name. Kevin Antle and Joe Exotic they breed, and Carol Baskin doesn't breed.
Yeah.
That's a huge difference. If you're breeding, that's a big mark against you. And also Carol Baskin's trying to get the Big Cat Public Safety Act passed to outlaw this kind of thing. So I don't know. I think in the show, I've met Carol Baskin. I really don't know. I've never been to her place. I don't know exactly what it's like. I'm so concerned about making our place the best we can make it. I really don't go around too much. But the producer of the show did an interview for the Washington Post just a couple of days ago. and he actually mentioned PAWS and said that, there are sanctuaries that are run professionally and different, and we were the only one that he mentioned. And and since he interviewed me for the show, I think there are two more shows that I've heard are going to be produced for this series. I'm not sure about that, but that's what I've kind of heard.
Yeah.
And so there's a chance that we might be on one of those shows. Hopefully we're the sane people who try to make sense, But I'll tell you that kind of life, that cult life, that almost all of those places had, is really common with tigers and elephants and animals, wild animals. I think some people just are attracted to it and love it. And I don't know how anyone can love keeping a tiger in an enclosure. I don't love doing this. I don't love the fact that the elephants have huge areas, but they have a limit. They have a fence. And tigers the same way. Tigers would be roaming, 30, 40 square miles.
And by themselves, right?
Yeah, they would live by themselves. They would get together to breed and then separate. And the mother raises the babies, and then they go on to have their own territories. And I mean, there's a system that has worked for millions of years with these types of animals. And you put them in a cage, it's kind of well, if you took a wild bird, put it in a box, it beats itself to death. It breaks its wings trying to get out of the box. And these tigers are the same way. They just do not thrive being enclosed. They might live a longer life. It's an easier life. But they'll go their entire life, in captivity. They might live 20 years. Not that long in the wild, right. But their job is to thin out herds and populations of animals, take old animals, take young animals, and eat them. And in 20 years, an animal in captivity will never do their job. It's like they're unemployed. You have to feed them, you have to take care of them, you have to make sure they have water. If you see a wild tiger, the last thing they would depend on is a human being.
Right. And then you watch this documentary and you see, everyone at Joe Exotic's place feeding these tigers, and they're just in these cages by, the 20s, all grouped together.
Yeah.
Obviously, the producers, you left a mark on them, and they could see that you were doing things right. I've been to your place. I see that you're doing things right. It seems like Carol Baskin also has good intentions. You mentioned the Big Cat Public Safety Act. What are your thoughts on her being villainized after this documentary came out?
Well,
or I guess, it kind of strayed away into her personal life a little bit, right?
Yeah, well, it's not the presentation I would have wanted, for our place or for me personally.
Yeah.
But, there are differences. Our people that work here are paid employees that are trained. I think it's always a little dangerous when you rely on volunteers to be working with the animals. And, there are just a lot of differences between different sanctuaries. And I know, I don't know anything really personally about her. I learned a lot on the show, and I'm sure there's two sides to everything, so I don't know. I read something that she wrote and she was pretty disappointed in the show, but
Yeah.
I think you have to be careful about, your image.
Right.
I think that's very important. Nobody here dresses up like a cat. I'll just tell you that.
Well, I am wearing my cheetah print scarf. I was trying to, hone my inner Carol.
That's right. But you are not. You're probably not going to take us into your closet and show us all of your clothes.
Yeah,
that are all
no.
printed cats. Yeah.
Yeah. This is probably the one thing that I have. So I think we're good on that front. I also wanted to talk to you because a lot of these characters, they're, kind of doing what we're doing right now. They're making the rounds on the podcast reel. And one thing that Mr. Antle has said is, he would never sell tiger cubs. He would never euthanize tiger cubs because they're just so rare. I wanted to talk to you about that. Are tiger cubs rare, or is there really a black market where they're being sold and, peddled like French bulldogs?
Well, the first rescue, well, not the first, but the biggest rescue we've ever done, and the biggest that anyone has ever done, was in 2004. And just to let you know how valuable tiger cubs are, there was a man in Southern California who had 150 tigers. And by the time the USDA and Fish and Wildlife got in there and saw what was going on, 90 tigers had starved to death. Oh. And this guy had 58 baby tigers in the freezer. So they are a liability. After they get to be a certain age, after just a few months, they're too dangerous. I mean, a 6-month-old tiger could easily kill a child. Yeah. So they go from being a moneymaker to a liability. Here's my rule. If somebody who is in the circus or a tiger breeder, animal breeder, roadside zoo owner, if they're talking, I just immediately don't believe what they're saying. And I think that's an easy rule to follow after watching that Tiger King.
Yeah, that was also something I wanted to touch on. The documentary, I'm sure they have said that they started out with the purest of intentions to shed a light on some of the abuses that go on when people keep exotic animals as pets, or, when they have them in these roadside zoos. What are some things that you saw in the documentary that just absolutely horrified you, that seemed to be kind of glossed over by production?
By production?
Yeah, because I mean, there's a scene where, Joe Exotic is literally pulling a baby tiger cub away from the mother right after it's born. He pulls it with a hook towards him and pulls it under the fence, right. And, stuff like that.
Under a rusty fence, brand new. I mean, a baby that is just minutes old. And, I think, I told somebody today who I was talking to that is in the animal welfare industry, and they weren't happy with the treatment that the tigers got in this. They thought it was too much about personalities. And I said exactly that scene. I said, just to get that one scene where they're pulling a brand new baby in the mud, in the dirt, with a stick out from underneath the mother and under a rusty fence, and while it's screaming, and the mother, what's the mother thinking? The mother is giving birth, and they have such maternal instincts. And all of a sudden, it has to be confusing and stressful for these mothers that are all of a sudden their whole litter is gone, and these guys are dragging it into the house to raise it on a bottle, because if you let the mother raise it, you can't handle them. So that's why they raise them on a bottle. And then when the tourists come or you take them to the fair, people can hold on to them for a $50 picture. So I think just to get that one scene in a 7-part series, I think was really effective, and I was really happy that they used that. And also, Joe Exotic carrying a gun, shooting when a tiger grabbed him and dragged him around the cage, and that you can see the type of people, all of those people. The guy from Indiana too, with the monkey in his lap. I mean, and also the guy Jeff Lowe. And, everybody has a mugshot, everybody's been in jail, or they're going to go to jail at some point, or they should be in jail. They're not the kind of people that you would expect are in charge of conservation of tigers,
Right. It's sounding like your view is that, just by putting those scenes in there, they don't necessarily need to say that it's wrong. They're hoping that people see that and are turned off by that.
Yeah, I think everybody, that is the one scene that I think has stuck in everybody. And also, the 20 tigers in a cage pacing back and forth in the mud, and they're going to throw the food into a muddy yard, and they don't have enough food for the day, and the workers doing drugs and smoking cigarettes around the tigers. I mean, from beginning to end, it was disrespectful to the animals, and I think that's very important to show that that's just the way they are. And this, if you look at the documentary, these are just a few places. You travel around the country and go to all of these places, and pretty much most of them would be similar.
Yeah, and we saw them feeding the tigers rotten meat from the grocery store. What does that do to a tiger's well-being when you're feeding them something like that?
Well, you can give them disease. I mean, you can give them for sure you can give them a disease, and we don't do that. We don't have that. We tried it one time. Somebody brought us some of that, and we threw most of it away.
Yeah.
And I think in this documentary, the people were eating that meat. I've never been so happy to be a vegan.
Yeah. Yeah, that just showed the deplorable conditions.
Right, I'm vegan, but I buy more meat than anybody in this county because I have tigers.
I remember you told me that when we came to visit.
Yeah,
super ironic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I was wondering just one more thing about Tiger King before we dive back into what it is you guys do at PAWS. I was wondering if you could touch on the cub petting, because I think everyone believes that it's harmless. What harm could be done to a tiger cub just by holding it and, petting it lovingly and taking a picture with it? What harm does that really do? And then when people go and share those pictures, what effect does that have?
Well, every baby that they hold was dragged away from its mother, just like the worst scene in that documentary. So hopefully that will stick in people's minds that the mother is abused and the baby is abused in order for you to do that. We had the Lodi Wine Festival. Seems like it would be a nice, classy thing. They had tiger petting there year before last, and I couldn't believe it. Wow. I could not believe. We tried to get them to see that it wasn't the right thing to do. The people had a lot of violations who did it, and they buy their tigers from people like the people on that show. That's where they go, and they go for cash. They go under the table. They go for cash. You're not supposed to sell an endangered species, but if you look closely at the records that they showed on that show, there are places in California that Joe Exotic dealt with, and they're in business, and people go and pay money to see them. And those are the cats that come from a place like Joe Exotic's.
Yeah. Have you ever been in like a battle like we saw between Carol and Joe, the do-gooder that wanted to put a stop to the cub petting? Have you ever found yourself embroiled in a battle like that?
Yeah, like constantly.
Yeah, that's
but
the majority of your work, right?
Yeah, there was an orangutan trainer in Las Vegas beating up his orangutans a long time ago, and somebody brought us an undercover video of him just beating up the orangs. Had trainers holding them so he could hit them with his stick before every show. Wow. And so we gave the video to the USDA and Entertainment Tonight. And Entertainment Tonight put it on the air, and I said, look, you're the producer. I said, you're the expert. This is a real video, I'm sure, but you guys are, the experts, you make sure it is. And they put it on the air, and it was the lead story for a week on Entertainment Tonight. So we were sued for $20 million. Pat was sued for $20 million, and PAWS was sued for $20 million. We had a huge battle.
Wow.
and we lost.
No
And in
way.
Las Vegas, yeah, we lost. And then the Supreme Court of Nevada overturned it because Las Vegas was so corrupt. The court was so corrupt that they wouldn't let this guy lose, and so it was that was our first fight. But
Yeah.
we fought the circus for so many years, and we just got beaten up, bloody nose. But we're pretty tenacious. Pat was extremely tough and brilliant. So we persevered, and now we're still here, and the circus is gone. And hopefully, in a year or two, these roadside zoos. I mean, we don't need roadside. If we, what do we need? What do we need the San Francisco Zoo or the LA Zoo or the Fresno Zoo for? If people go to see animals at Joe Exotic's place, you know, why do we need that? And the answer is we don't need it. Tigers don't need it. There are more tigers in captivity in the United States, twice as many as there are in all of the wild. So it's it's out of control. It's crazy,
Yeah.
and that Tiger King. I applaud the guy who made that, the man and woman who produced that, because they hit a home run with that as far as viewership. Probably the coronavirus helped with the audience.
Yeah.
And yeah, when you see people sort of thinking that Joe Exotic is a romantic figure and gosh, he's just an independent guy and he got a bad rap. He shot 5 tigers. Just remember he shot 5 tigers and dragged numerous tigers out away from their mothers. So I
Yeah.
got no sympathy. No
Right.
sympathy there.
And that's just one person featured in one documentary, and you just told us the story about the Las Vegas orangutan guy. So it's just heartbreaking to think about everything that's going on around the country, as we speak, with things that we haven't even heard of. I wanted
Yeah.
to take it back to PAWS, because when you spoke about the orangutans, it reminded me that you have other animals at ARC 2000. You have elephants. We saw some bears. I wanted to touch base on the elephants because I know there's a particular celebrity who has helped you get a lot of elephants to ARC 2000. Could you share a little bit about that and where some of your elephants are from?
Well, yeah. Bob Barker, who is now 96 years old, and we just heard from him. And he was very. We met him in the 80s, 86, I think, and worked together on a lot of different things with him over the years, all animal welfare oriented. And he became really interested in elephants. So he told us one day that there were 4 elephants that he wanted us to take, and within a year we had all of those elephants. It's adopting a dog is hard.
Yeah.
you know Adopting 2 or 3, 4 elephants within one year, coming in from Alaska, 2 from the circus, 1 from a zoo. But they all did great, and we still have all but one of them. Yeah, Bob Barker is I think he's one of the most important animal rights people probably in that's ever lived. He gave up a big job with the old Miss America show because he wouldn't give away fur coats. He
Yeah.
didn't want people wearing fur coats on the show, and they said, "Well, we're going to do that," and he quit. So he gave up a nice job, and every day he talked about his spay and neuter on his Price is Right show every single day, and people all over the country know him for that. And then he was just a champion for elephants. I
Yeah.
mean, he was, and he's a tough guy. I mean, he's when you go to in a meeting with him, he's kind of like Happy Gilmore.
Wow,
he's
that's something I would love to see in person.
he's a funny guy and tough guy.
Yeah. Ed, how do you transport an elephant?
We've done it all kinds of different ways. The hardest way, or the most exciting, I guess, would be flying. We flew an elephant. Well, I've flown three three elephants, but the one we flew from Alaska, and that was a Bob Barker elephant, and she was by herself up in Alaska. She was an African elephant who was an orphan in Africa and just got shipped all over and wound up in Anchorage, Alaska, of all places, in the freezing cold, and spent a lot of her time inside a barn and didn't, just probably the worst situation you could find for an elephant. Yeah. So Bob and I went up to Anchorage and did a press conference and talked about the elephant and said we would take the elephant. And so anyway, it worked out that we could get the elephant. So then we had to figure out how to move Maggie from Alaska to California. She was too weak, really kind of very weak. She wouldn't have made it through another winter, is what most people thought up there. So you couldn't put her on a boat. That was too hard, too long. You couldn't put her in a truck, so we had to fly her. And there was no airplane that came into Alaska that was big enough to fly the crate with the elephant. So we needed the Air Force. And so we approached the Air Force from the bottom, trying to go up to the generals and allow them to use the C-17 to fly the elephant. And we were getting nowhere. And so Bob Barker called people in Washington that he knew on the Defense Committee, and then to the Pentagon. And that was a much easier way of going if you could do that.
If you have the connection, right?
Yeah. So anyway, it worked out. Maggie, the last day that it didn't snow in Alaska, it was November 2nd. We loaded her onto a plane in a crate, C-17 military jet. The Air Force, I'll tell you, it was like ninjas. These guys and women were, in fact, a woman flew the plane. And it was incredible to just watch the Air Force and how incredibly quiet they were, and how respectful they were to the elephant, and how much effort they put into it. And then at the end of the flight, they gave me the bill, which was $191,000. And I told them I didn't have my wallet with me. So Bob paid. Thank God Bob paid for that.
Oh, what a guy, right?
Yeah, there were 30 people on the plane just to take care of the elephant.
Wow.
And she ate and drank, and she was fine through the whole flight, but I was a wreck.
Yeah, and we got to see Maggie in action when we came up and visited you guys in San Andreas. And is she still doing well?
Yeah, she's doing well. I think those years were tough on her. She was down and couldn't get up a couple of times in Alaska, and they had to hoist her with a crane, and she was only 25 years old, so it was way too early for that to be happening.
Right.
So she has some permanent joint issues, and but she still every day is climbing to the top of the mountain. She's over the captive life expectancy, which is pretty dismal at 38 years old. But in the wild, they'll live in their 60s, and in captivity, they die when they're in their 30s. So
wow, well,
that'll just show you how they don't thrive in captivity. Every one of our African elephants is, we have the second oldest African elephant in the country, in North America, actually. And her name's Lulu from the San Francisco Zoo, and she's 54 years old. So, wow. She should still, if she was wild, she'd still be having babies at 54. And if they're alive at 54 in captivity, I mean, they call them geriatric when they're in their early 30s. It's crazy. Wow. It's captivity makes elephants old fast. They're just not built for it. So, if you want to save an elephant, don't breed an elephant in captivity. Save some habitat, and that's the only way to do it. That's the only way to do it.
Right. Well, luckily, they were rescued by you and they can live out the rest of those days at ARC 2000. I wanted to talk about your former partner who helped you build all of this. You've mentioned her a couple of times, Pat Derby. I think
Right.
you mentioned that the entertainment industry is kind of what sparked her interest in animal conservation. I was wondering if you could talk about her a little more and just how you guys got started.
Well, I met her at, she was still doing commercial animal work, and she had worked for, she was from England, and she's, she was brilliant. I mean, absolutely. You could start any classic English poem and she could finish the whole thing. Her father taught English literature at Cambridge University, and she was a ballet dancer and a musician, and I mean, she was very well trained in the arts, to say the least. And I'm from Cleveland, so I have no idea how we got together, but but we hit it off, and when I came out, I thought, she showed me around the Los Angeles animal training compounds, and it wasn't far off from the Joe Exotic stuff.
Wow.
And I thought, man, if people could see this stuff, how these animals live, nobody would watch a movie, nobody would watch a commercial. It was bad. And she was still doing a few jobs with some of the animals that she had when I first met her. And one was the Lincoln Mercury cougar, which nobody under 50 remembers, but he did. We had a cougar named Christopher who did commercials with Farrah Fawcett, and big major things on TV. And I hated it. I hated every minute of it. I thought, my God, these. I don't think Christopher or any mountain lion should be, number one, on a leash, and number two, in New York City, flying around the country, doing a commercial. It sounded like it was an exotic life for him, but he liked it better when he liked it when Pat was with him, but
Yeah.
they're not made to live in captivity, and I had that mindset from the beginning, and so we basically just stopped. And when we stopped, we formed PAWS, and just tried to improve the lives of animals, in like Christopher and all the rest of the animals that are in TV shows and roadside zoos and places like that. So it was easy for me. I thought from the very beginning they shouldn't be in captivity at all. I was surprised to learn that none of the offspring. I thought when I went to the zoo, somebody was going to go home. You see 10 animals, you figure 2 or 3 are going to get to go back.
Yeah.
And when I found out almost none are going back, that was kind of disappointing. And I thought, well, if they're not going back, why are we continue to breed them? And the explanation is that people go to a zoo, roadside zoo, circus, wherever, and see an animal, and then they appreciate the animal. Then they do something to save their habitat. That so far that hasn't worked, because the habitats are all shrinking, and more and more people are seeing them in roadside zoos all around the world. So I think it's time to just stop captivity. It's a lot of it looks just like the Joe Exotic show.
Yeah.
Just stop captivity and focus on what is really effective, which is saving their habitat. And that seems simple to me, but all these things are economic problems. It's people need farmland, people want to build a house, people want to build a road. The Chinese and us go to Africa and build big roads right through sensitive habitat and cut off migratory routes, and little things like that are going to finish off elephants and tigers and everything else if we don't back off a little bit.
Yeah, and PAWS has accomplished so much. I know you guys put a stop to the use of bull hooks on elephants. You guys got that legislation passed. Are you guys doing any work at all to try and get that Big Cat Public Safety Act passed that we saw in the
Oh yeah,
documentary? Or what's next for you guys? What are
sure.
you working on doing?
Yeah, that's what we're doing. A few years ago, after the bullhook ban, I thought, most people now, the public now knows that you shouldn't hit an elephant with a. I mean, it doesn't seem like you would have to tell people this, but that they would. But they got so much publicity from the circus saying that it doesn't hurt the elephants. But we got the weapon, the bullhook, banned in California, and I thought, okay, now that elephant welfare has a life of its own. And I thought the tiger thing is what's not being understood now, and it's a complicated issue. It's an endangered animal. Why wouldn't you breed an endangered animal? It's hard to really explain it. And the worst thing that ever happened is the term endangered species anyway. They should have come up with the term endangered habitat.
Yeah.
Then we'd be doing the right thing instead of creating so many baby tigers and dragging them through the mud. So we started concentrating on tigers and lions in the last few years, and it's worked out good. I mean, this Tiger King show has. I don't know how anybody can watch it and think that roadside zoos are a thing of the future.
Right.
I think they're a thing of the past, and it should have been gone 50 years ago. The most encouraging thing, and it happened on our bullhook ban. The bullhook ban we did with the Humane Society of the United States, PAWS, and the Oakland Zoo. And every zoo in California, I was sitting in the chambers in Sacramento at a Senate hearing, and every zoo in California came up and said they support the bullhook ban. That was what really made it sail through. San Diego Zoo came up, the Zoo Association in California came up and said that they were in strong support of the bill. And that was a huge step, I think. And now the CEO of the Association of Zoos and Aquariums has written a letter saying that he is in favor of the Big Cats Public Safety Act. I don't see how anybody can vote against it with the humane world, the animal rights world, the sanctuary people, and the zoos all for this. It seems like it's a slam dunk. So people still have to write their congressman and senator to make sure that they support it. It's bipartisan. They're Democrats, Republicans. It's a chance for everybody to kind of come together a little bit. It's a black and white common sense issue. It's not an animal rights thing. It's not a a First Amendment thing. It's not you take away my property. It's just simply the right thing to do, and I think everybody who sees it knows it.
Yeah, it's an empathy thing.
Yeah, right.
And
That always amazed me that some people have empathy and some people don't.
yeah.
I saw somebody said when they saw that, the takeaway on the Joe Exotic show was, if I knew that tigers were only $2,000, I would have had one a long time ago. I couldn't believe that comment.
Yeah, just the worst thing you could say after watching that.
Yeah, I mean, like, how do you totally miss the entire show?
Yeah. Well, I did tweet yesterday that we were going to be chatting with you, and our local representative, Congressman Josh Harder, tweeted back at me and said he is a big supporter of the Big Cat Public Safety Act. So maybe we can get something rolling even more than it already is. But I wanted to end on a note and let people know how they can contribute to the cause of saving exotic animals, a cause that you have dedicated your life to. And I know that PAWS has an open house coming up at ARC 2000. So I wanted to know if you could tell us more about that, when it is, obviously not during the pandemic, but yeah, if you wanted to plug that really quick before we say goodbye.
Well, I think if people want to know more about us, and I know it's hard to, donations are going to be tough because everybody has to worry about themselves right now. But when this is all over, don't forget about us. But if they go to pawsweb.org, just pawsweb.org, they can see when the open house would be rescheduled and when all of our events that we would have. We don't have very many, but you're welcome to come and visit. We don't. It's nothing like Joe Exotic's tour.
Yeah,
Thank
appreciate
God.
from a distance, right?
Appreciate from a distance and get to discuss things like we're discussing today. And I also wanted to say that since the AZA is for the Big Cat Public Safety Act, the Fresno Zoo is in the AZA, so it makes sense that they would be for it too. So,
Yeah.
it doesn't. It's just such an easy choice. I mean, it should have been done 30 years ago, but I guess it's never too late. And hopefully, in 20 years, the babies that are being born into this horrible industry right now will be adults and passing away, and then we won't have to worry about it anymore. I mean, first you have to turn off the faucet, just keep these people from producing so many babies in horrible situations.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Ed, we thank you for your time and being on the 209 podcast. Hopefully, we get to see you in one of those upcoming new Tiger King episodes. That will be super exciting.
I'm not,
But
I don't know if I'm excited about it or not.
I have my fingers crossed. I'm sorry to tell you. I hope I see you on there. But tell
Okay.
all the animals we the 209 podcast said hello. And again, we thank you for your time and have a good rest of your week.
Okay. Well, thanks for keeping up with us.
Yeah, no problem. Talk to you later, Ed.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.